That's amazing. So I have to ask at one higher level of abstraction. If you can answer this, then nobody can tell me nothing about Ash Framework. I'm a true believer. So the next level of abstraction on top of that is, okay, I've got my policies. That's amazing. What if I have a different authorization strategy for my GraphQL API versus my JSON API versus my LiveView? What if we branch out another level?
Yep. There are ways you could do that.
That's going to be rare. So just to not, put you on the spot, like that is already 90%, 95% amazing.
What we could do easily is, add context. So there's context. Watch, I'll show you, put it all back. And then I could write a separate policy. The way it works is any policy that applies has to match, right?
You're saying it would be easy to add this into Ash. Or well, not easy, but
it would be trivial. It would be trivial.
So now you've seen the basic form of the Ash programming model. You've seen the basic form of the LiveView programming model. Now we're going to build a Twitter clone with the man himself, the Ash Framework creator, and see how you start from your Phoenix router into LiveView, into Ash, and what that means for you with regards to now you've got Ash, and now you can expand out to building a JSON API, a GraphQL layer, anything. And that's what we're going to get into right now.
All right. So I will say, we've got this sort of pre-built. So I'm going to run you through what the various pieces look like and how they all fit together. It didn't take very long to do this. And mostly this is following the setup tutorials for the packages and that kind of thing. That takes it's the bulk of it because that does a lot of the work for you. But let's just, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the app itself. So make sure it's running. Yep, it's running. So you'll see when we go to the app here, we're immediately presented with a sign-in page. And this sign-in page is actually it's created for us. This is created for us by a package called Ash Authentication, which was just released. It's a huge addition to the Ash ecosystem. And you can think of it like our version, our declarative version, like no code generation version of Mixed Phoenix Gen Auth, except it also supports social login right out of the box with custom strategies and Magic Link stuff coming, Magic Link strategies coming very soon. So it's extremely powerful. It's extremely useful. I honestly get goosebumps whenever I set up a new application and set up authentication because I'm just remembering how difficult this used to be. And it's surprisingly flexible thanks to some of the design underlying it behind how resources work and how the package itself was designed. So what that looks like, in the sort of real world is we have Ash Authentication and Ash Authentication Phoenix packages in our mixed file. And then we have in our router, we have, let's see if I can find sign-in route. So we have, you copy this stuff into your app and you say there's a password reset route, there's a sign-in route, sign-in route. So this is just given to you by the tutorial, you drop it in and this will construct everything. And this sign-in route actually comes from Ash Authentication Phoenix, which gives you pre-built live views and components for authentication. So this is nowhere in my app, and I have a bunch of customization options. I haven't used them because this is a demo app, but you can customize what all this stuff looks like, or you can just replace it with all of your own stuff. The logic for signing in is built into the resources, not the UI, not the controllers. So if you want to write your own sign-in view or whatever, you can do that. You just call it the appropriate actions on the resource to sign in. So all of this stuff was generated for me. I didn't have to write any logic for registration. I didn't have to do any of that.
Even the UI. The UI is this is out of the box?
Yeah, all of this. It's all out of the box. And the way it works actually is you have the ability to do what's called overrides, where I can override for any component in here. I can override things like a common one is if I wanted to, let's see, I think it's, I'd have to remember exactly what the options are here, but I think I can set something like image URL and then put in a different image. So I can I like this UI. I just want to give it a better, I want to give it my logo, right? And you can change everything about it. It's actually really surprisingly powerful. And then, like I said, of course, if you grow out of it or whatever, you just write your own UI. But this gets you started in no time flat. I've never seen anything like it. So I can register, and it runs like this sort of email flows and all that sort of stuff. I think it's recompiling because I saved some files. And yeah, now we're into the app. So, if I had set up emails and stuff like that, I would have sent a confirmation email and all that. We're not doing that for the demo, but what you can see here is I've run. This is a Phoenix generator to get the UI, and then I've replaced the implementation internals with Ash framework implementations, right? So we don't have a generator that will generate a UI or anything like that right now. So this is a live view. I can pull this up here. This is going to be in the index, and you can see we've got our template in here. We're rendering inline. Maybe controversial, but I prefer that than to putting like a file next to the thing.
Can we go back to the router real quick, Zach? Because I did see some on-mount callbacks in the router when we were looking at the authentication. Is there anything interesting?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Is that live?
We should talk about that.
That's Ash authentication. Okay.
Yeah, so this is Ash authentication live session. This is just a little a convenience wrapper around live session that puts any logged in user in there for you, right? So, and then you can attach additional on-mount hooks like this one, for example, to get to this route, live user auth. This is my own thing, right? It's called Ash HQ Web. I copied this in from another app. So ignore that name, but this is my own little on-mount where I'm like, these routes, I need there to be a current user, and these ones, or this is optional, this is required. And then I call that over here like this. So straightforward live view stuff. And then we have our live out. So we hit / and live / that's this right here, scope /. They're just going to the same page as, / tweets / we just made that the same. So then we can go and look at index. And we have a view here that would list the tweets for us. And on mount, we are going to subscribe to the tweets, to any new tweets being created. We'll talk a little bit about that in a second. And then we're gonna fetch any tweets, right? And so we get a UI like this. Let's say hello world, and save the tweet. And I got a tweet here, and I can like the tweet. I can edit it. I can say, never mind, it's not public, right? So this stuff is all pretty standard stuff. But the implementation under the hood is leveraging. So I would say the first thing you can take away from this is, right, you can build things effectively the same way you would build them if you were just using Ecto and not using a sort of higher level abstraction. It's not like limiting me from building a UI like this or anything like that. But what I think, where it gets interesting is when we look at how this is all implemented. So we've looked at Ash authentication. Let's just kind of go through, we'll do this feature review. We'll go through, in addition, we talked about Ash authentication. So we're going to talk about, let's just start with listing tweets, right? So how do we do that? Listing tweets, we have an assign tweets function in here. And so the way this works is, and I think you can kind of see this is nice. We've abstracted away the sort of rules for like a Twitter feed, for example, into a function that we call on the resource that is a code interface function. And that lives, let me delete that there. And that lives right here. So you can see the feed for a user. We take a user ID as an argument, and what we do, this preparation, we talked about changes a bit earlier, but preparations are how you build up a query. It's a little bit different from a change set and a change. So preparations are like plugs for queries. So what we'll do is, this is a built-in preparation. We'll sort by inserted at descending, and then we will filter only the ones that this user ought to see. So we'll show a little bit more. Actually, let's just dive into the whole concept of what this user ought to see. I'm going to sign in as another user. If I can type, I will do that. All right. Yep. Okay. So I will register, change my email address. Okay. So you'll see, I can see this user over here can see everything that's been posted so far. But if I were to go in here and I were to say, make this not public, this part doesn't live update, but a lot of times it doesn't make a lot of sense to like pull things off of the page. I generally decide not to do that. So that's the reason that that's not implemented here.
Okay.
Is it making it not public? It is not making it not public. That is probably just a little bug. Let's not worry about it. I'm going to make a tweet that is not public.
Okay. And the other guy should not see it.
And then, yeah, you'll see this. This doesn't see it. So that's the edit thing. Maybe in a second we'll actually just fix that live because I'm.
Can you show creating a tweet and that the left side sees it?
Yeah, creating a tweet here that is public. You can see we have load one new tweet.
And there it is. Okay, excellent.
And here it is. Yep. So, I'll tell you what. I think this will be informative. Actually, let's actually just look and see when we edited our tweet why what happened there, right? So, you can see that uses the update action. We have this argument, and it says.
Can you show us at the live view where it gets into this from into Ash?
Yep. So this is going to be in the let's see, we have a modal here that if our live action is new or edit, then it will render the form component with the form. And the way that actually works is in the form component. We have a wrapper over there's a special data structure and tool that you use with Ash to work with Phoenix LiveView forms and Phoenix forms called ashphoenix.form. And it's a dedicated data structure for managing forms, which includes managing complicated nested forms, which is a huge pain point generally with using before, right? So there's not an example of that in this demo. Maybe we'll add it if we have some time. But it will actually manage related updates to arbitrarily nested complex forms. And that's, I think, a pretty big competitive edge in that front. But as it is now, it just allows you to build a form for a specific action, and it will, it knows the types and all that sort of stuff. Same with how you would do it with a change set. And then when we validate the form, we just say ashphoenix.form.validate. You can see this is nice because this is made to be used as a form. So the interface is very similar to what you would expect it to be,
right?
Up into even this, where you just say submit the form, and by submitting the form, I'm saying run the action that I originally created the form with, with the API that I gave you here, and as this user, and that so that's a nice sort of interface for that, and so that's how this is all implemented. So I can already see, if we look in this update action, the logic bug that I had here is I copied the create action. The create action is saying, if they've said public, then set visibility to public. However, the update action, this is saying if they've said public, then set the visibility to public, right? But what I actually need to do, because this is an update, I need to set it to, like, if this might mean they're trying to change it, to not be public anymore. And I need to say private here, which I believe is the.
Oh, that's going to change the code that we were running, or the.
Yes.
Yeah, that's going to make it work, right?
So exactly, this ought to make it work. And so now, if I refresh this page, and let me pull up the other one, refresh this page. So if I were to now go in and say take this one here and say it's not public. And refresh the page here, I no longer see.
Oh, there we go. Look at that. Live debugging. And what's cool, so tell me why this is cool in terms, so we've now got this Ash form component. The promise of Ash is that we have this unified interface with this update. And so essentially you can just use this if you're building a GraphQL layer, an admin interface. And that's essentially, now that you've created this structure, it's easy to just bolt on more interfaces, outside interfaces into your Ash interface, correct?
Yes, absolutely. So I don't have it set up in this demo, but what you would do to put that, to put like creating a tweet over a data layer would look like this. I can do it in 3 seconds.
Good Lord.
Well, actually, we want to create one. That is all of it. So you have some setup when you first set up Ash GraphQL to set up your schema and say, put all of the stuff that I've defined into this schema. And then it defines the types. It defines the mutations. There's a data loader already implemented. It does all of the work under the hood there. And I would say, while we're here, this is the thing that people often see. The alarm bells go off when they see this. They think, well, I don't want to just put my data directly into an API, right? They're like, the point is, and that's the point here, is that that's not what you're doing. With Ash, you're moving the layer of indirection down into your application, right? Because this is just a concept, right? I can add virtual fields. I can remove it. I can say this no longer maps to a Postgres database table. Instead, it's all manual actions. And, because it doesn't, and now maybe my tweets live in some no-code database somewhere else because or not no-code, NoSQL database because we, outgrew Postgres. That's not going to happen, but you get the point, right? You still have this layer of indirection, but it's behind a well-specified, consistently usable API. So that means if you have a JSON API and a GraphQL and admin interfaces and whatever, they're all going to start using whatever new thing that you put behind an action, behind this create action, automatically. So it moves into your application where that layer of indirection is.
All right, so the best argument against this, right? So immediately it's like, holy crap, this is amazing. You just literally created a GraphQL layer. All I got to do is go to the router, create a GraphQL interface, make sure it's authenticated, and boom, now we have a GraphQL API. Oh, I need a JSON API? Cool.
Yep.
So that's insane. And so the very next question is, which you did answer in our intro, which was, okay, but what if things get crazy? Typically, it's going to be in the authorization layer. What if only a super admin can see this? Oh, what if only my friend only recent friends can see this? In terms of that customization, like this is the moment where it's like, can Ash handle those types of things? If so, it can live up to this promise that you're making.
Yeah. Okay, I have two answers to that question. Because the first answer doesn't really answer the question, which is we have authorization built into the framework, like rich authorization built into the framework. So this is the specific thing that you talked about. But if I said authorizers, I don't know how to spell the word authorizers. I think it's like that. Whatever, like that. So I can use the policy authorizer, and then I get an interface for defining policies. For instance, that if I said action type read, and let's say you can only read a tweet. Actually, I set the foundation for this with visible too. If I say authorize if, this is going to blow, honestly, most people don't understand how this works. Like it seems a little magic, but if I say authorize if visible to, and then I say actor ID, right? This will actually automatically filter all of the read actions to only return the tweets that are visible to the user. So what that means is you could remove, if you wanted to, it's nice to be explicit, but you could remove this and instead make a resource that just automatically adapts to who the user is, showing them just the stuff that they've been provisioned to see. Now, that's a design choice. You don't necessarily always want to build it that way, but that is a way that you can do it. And what many people will do instead is they're going to say something like, well, I want to design my action sort of very, explicitly, where it says, here's the filter, right? And then what they'll do instead is they'll say for the action feed, and they'll authorize if, I don't think we have argument equals as a built-in. You can define your own checks in it by giving it a module that defines a check. But let's just say we had argument equals, and then you could say, user ID is actor user ID or something like this, right? In the real world, it's going to look like a module with a match, and then you check, like, does the user ID equal the argument? Okay. But anyway, you could do it like this as well, where you don't use the filtering tools. Instead, you just write a simple check that says, did you give me your user ID? And if you did, then you can run this action. Right. And then I could do things like, bypass always and say, authorize if actor attribute
super
equals.
User.
Yep.
Amazing.
Or super user, yeah.
Wow.
And so this bypass
will... this is insane that you literally... so anybody watching this, like, we have not prepped this. The fact that he did this live, that's amazing. So I have to ask at one higher level of abstraction. If you can answer this, then nobody can tell me nothing about Ash Framework. I'm a true believer. So the next level of abstraction on top of that is, okay, I've got my policies. That's amazing. What if I have a different authorization strategy for my GraphQL API versus my JSON API versus my LiveView? What if we branch out another level?
Yep. There are ways you could do that.
That's going to be rare. So just to not, put you on the spot. Like that is already 90%, 95% amazing.
So there's the simplest way that you would do it. I think we would actually we could add something. Nobody's asked for this yet. But what we could do easily is add context. So there's context. Watch, I'll show you. Put it all back. Let's just assume that this context existed. It would take like one person 20 minutes to add it to the different API extensions. But I could say something like context equals, access from, Ash GraphQL or something like that.
Okay.
And then I could write a separate policy. The way it works is any policy that applies has to match, right?
You're saying
I don't
it
think
would be easy to add this into Ash. Or well, not easy, but
it would be trivial.
It
would be trivial. The only thing I would say is I wouldn't recommend it. The reason I wouldn't recommend it is kind of the point of Ash is that the resource acts as that differentiation point. So you're kind of talking, if it has different access rules, you're talking about a different action. Even if it behaves very similarly, it is a different action. So I would say we could add that. And I think nobody's asked for it yet because the point is that consistency. So if there's something different about it in the GraphQL, there should be something different about it in your resource.
Okay. Wow. I mean, this is phenomenal. All right. Yeah. I'm done. Let's keep going.
All right. So we've covered privating tweets and editing tweets. We even fixed a bug about it. So let's move on to liking tweets and how that is implemented. So you'll see I've got our 2 logged in users here. And if I like a tweet on one end,
maybe that's one of the private ones.
I did. It's a private one. Yeah, there we go. Okay. So if I like a tweet on one end, it will like it on the other end, and vice versa. And it's highlighted if I've liked it, if I myself have liked it, right? So let's talk a little bit about how that is implemented. We'll start with how it's implemented in the LiveView. Let me pull up the code again. This is in. Okay, here we go. So we've got a button right here where we check to see, has the tweet been liked by the current user, and that will render the button differently. And then we say that also changes what happens where if this means they'll dislike it and this means they'll like it, depending on what they do, right? So when we go back into, or when we take a look at those actions, let's actually talk about liked by user real quick. The way that we do this is when we load the tweets, we also load liked by user, and that's a calculation with an argument. So I'm going to pull that up in user. In tweet. So liked by user, this is an example of you can see kind of how powerful calculations are. This expression will run in the SQL query, right? In this case. And so liked by user is, does there exist an associated like to this tweet where the user ID is the user that you provided?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So now when we load the tweets, we're going to see, we'll properly mark them all as, read or not, depending. But then we need to handle, what happens when they like a tweet. And what we could do, we could just reload the world, right? But we want to take advantage of LiveView. We want to take advantage of the way that this is all set up. And so the way that it works instead is when we, when we like a tweet, which is somewhere in our handle event over here. Yeah, handle event, like and dislike. What we do is we call into our resources. We call into the tweet resource. We call the like action, right? So let's take a look at the like action. And you can see this is a manual action, right? Because we're not actually updating the tweet, but we kind of want the interface of tweet.like that we have right over here, right?
Right.
It makes sense that this is more part of that interface, right? And so we have tweet.like, and what that does is this calls a manual hook that will create the like underneath that links these two things, and then just return the original data unchanged, right? So this isn't going to issue an update to update the tweet. It's just going to create the like and return you back your original tweet.
You said unchanged,
and
or
then,
like with the state of the tweet? I guess the state of the like is a separate database relationship.
Correct. It is a separate. Now, we could. This is I would say a matter of design choice, but generally speaking, like it kind of gets a little bit hairy. Like what we could do is we could update the thing and add this like, but you generally aren't like loading all of the likes.
Okay.
You're like asking things like, has this user liked it? So what I could do, and I think this would be, I could say liked by user, true or something like that. But the way that it's designed now, it just makes a little bit more sense to kind of bypass that. And we're just in the UI here, we're saying liked by user true. So because we just like the tweet. So we don't need to run another database query or like refetch any data. We can just update the record that we have in memory. And that's what we do. So then we replace the tweet, which is like we go over the list of tweets and we replace the tweet that we have with the tweet that is marked as liked by user.
Okay, okay, go back. Where's the replace tweet coming from?
Yeah. So that'll be...
Is that connected to the feed? Okay, I see the load. So then, yeah, how's that connected to the... Yeah, how's that bubble up all the way through? So you're loading, I see you're reloading the state of that tweet. How does that connect all the way?
Well, yeah, so in this case, what we do, like when you say you like a tweet, we find the tweet that we have in our database, or that we have in the LiveView socket. We have the state of that tweet because that tweet exists here, right? So we find that tweet, and then we call the like action on it. And then we just, manually mark it as having been liked by this user.
And is that happening
in the list
for the liked by user when you do the feed query? Is that also being set for every single tweet that you're pulling out of the database? Where's liked by user?
Kind of. Yeah. So liked by that comes from when we say so liked by user is the calculation on tweet, and so this is going to add a field on tweet like liked by user.
Okay. Yep.
Or false, right? And so what we're doing here, though, is when you like a tweet, we're skipping the Ash internal like recalculate this value, and we're just saying you obviously like it because you just liked it,
right?
And we don't need to go look it up again. But when we initially load the tweets, and we call assign tweets here, we have this tweet load statement, right? And that is the author email, the like count, and whether or not it was liked by the current user. So that it's kind of a two-phase thing. We get it all up front, and then when you click like, we don't go fetch it again. We just update the state. So, and dislike looks pretty much exactly the same, right? We go find the tweet, we mark it as disliked, and then we say that you didn't like it. So let's talk a little bit about how this works, though, because we have another factor. The thing that we just talked about works for the tweets that you like, because we don't have to fetch them. But what about, this one one of these that is, here we go. What about this one? That's another user liking the tweet, and it's updating, right?
Right.
So it's got to be something else. And for that, we leverage what I think, we leverage Phoenix PubSub, or really you can use any PubSub thing. Like you don't have to use it with Phoenix. It's just PubSub in general. But we leverage the Phoenix endpoints PubSub to do this. And so what this looks like is in Tweet, we have a PubSub configuration. That's PubSub is a special kind of extension called a notifier. Notifiers have special properties. Notifiers, they have a subscribe function, they have a broadcast function. And additionally, the way notifications work in Ash is to solve like a classic bug that exists in probably like most live Phoenix apps that exist today, which is when Ash is completing Ash actions, like you have like nested actions, like in this action you create some things, and in this action you create some other things, right? All that sort of stuff, right? If it's in a transaction, if the data layer for that thing is in a transaction, Ash will accumulate all of the notifications that should go out, and it will wait until the transaction ends, and then it will send all of those notifications. Because a classic problem you have with PubSub is you have a function in your context like, like tweet, but somebody else calls that in a bigger in a greater transaction block. right? And you send that the tweet was liked, but the tweet doesn't actually exist yet, right? It's not in the database, or maybe it's created a tweet, right? But it's not in the database yet because the transaction hasn't closed. So that other person on some other node tries to read it, and they don't see it anymore, right? So notifications and notifiers are our solution to that problem. And the way it works is when you do manual things, Ash will warn you if you were in a transaction and the stuff that you called generated notifications, but you didn't pass in the option, which is return notifications. So it'll tell you if you're doing something that will accidentally
That's a really cool.
cause notifications not to go out. And so so it's great. So you nest a bunch of resource actions, and the system handles aggregating up all of the notifications until the final until the transaction ends and the topmost resource action completes. Then we send all of the notifications. And so that's how PubSub works as well. So we have this publish like, and so you can see this is kind of a pattern. You can read the docs for PubSub to see a little bit more about it. But like the way that this works is you provide the action, in this case, publish, or you can say the action type if you want to publish like every create over this topic. But then you also provide a template for a template for an event. And so in this case, this is going to put out like tweets, like, because it has a prefix there, tweets liked, and then like the ID of the tweet. You could also do this. So the way it works is it supports like, it will generate like all combinations of the values provided, right? So this, if with that configuration, it will say tweets liked, so you can publish both, right? And so if somebody wants to see, if somebody's subscribing to any tweet anywhere is liked, then they'll get the message. And here, if somebody wants to see just this specific tweet, if it's liked, then they'll get the message. Or you can say, for what, you wouldn't ever want to do this, but let's say you could include the text of the tweet, or even more, more realistically, you could include the user ID of the tweet. So if you wanted to say here, user ID, you could say like, where any tweet liked by the user ID, and you could subscribe to that, right? So these make it really expressive to put out like the specific messages you want to send and interpolate values from the action. And on an update, it will actually send both. It will, if the values are different from the beginning of the action and at the end of the action, it will send an update for the original values and the new values. So that if somebody, depending on which version of it you're listening for or subscribing for, you're going to get the event.
And then the subscription that's happening, so the subscription here is happening in the mount. Is that the only place we're subscribing to these notifications? Or not
right
notifications?
Now, yes. Well, it's in the mount. We have subscribed to tweets created. But then in assign tweets, we will go over each tweet and we will subscribe to, has this tweet just been liked or has this tweet been disliked?
Makes sense.
And so with that, the patterns for this often, right, this isn't necessarily always the right way to do it. In reality, if you're building Twitter scale something, you're going to need like a tweet liked service that knows which users to send it to, because you can't send every time anybody likes a tweet to anybody looking at the tweet. But this is a demo app, so we're going to show you the basics.
Phenomenal. So let's go back to the calculations inside of the tweet. I really want to look at that because we're doing some decently advanced database joins and stuff like that. I just want to confirm, can we just go to the Phoenix server and refresh the page? I just want to make sure there's no N+1 queries. Like, it would be really easy to write that in something like this.
Yes, it would indeed. If only somebody had thought about that. All right. So, it does handle that kind of thing. So if I refresh this page, what you'll see is it may run additional queries to fetch aggregate values. It's not necessarily always going to combine everything into one query, because most of the time that is not what you actually want. You want predictable long-term load. You don't want massive queries going out that will combine every calculated field and every aggregate that you want, right? So what it actually does is it'll fetch them. It'll like run the original query in some cases, and it will get the IDs, and it will fetch the aggregate value by those IDs. So it's going to use an index. It's not going to rerun your crazy filter that you originally had, right? But basically, it does what it can to make the operation of these sort of scalable in the long term. And so if we look at the SQL queries, we refresh the page. This is more than here. Hold on. Let's make some space. Okay. So we refresh the page. Oh, this is the double render.
Yeah, mountain. Yeah, so
it's the
yep.
Yeah, exactly. So let's just look here after it mounts, right? So we get this is the user logging in, right? That's getting the current user.
Yep.
And then here we are. We're selecting the tweets, and you can see that we're combining the aggregate author email, which is give me the first author's, the email of the author. We're also combining the calculation for visibility, right? Is there a like? No, this isn't visibility. This is liked by user, right? So we say, where there exists a thing, and that's getting the author email. And then we issued another one over here, which is to get the count of likes of the tweets. The number of likes got issued as a separate query because there's really, it's one of those things like, again, it could be faster if you combined it, but it would be the more predictably behave better if you don't.
Right.
So, and there's, I think we have some level of control over that, and we can always add more. But usually people don't ask about that kind of thing. They don't need to worry about it. And so when I like a tweet, or let's say I don't like a tweet, right? You're going to see, I have the debug config on for the pub sub because I wanted to see so you can put on debug to see everything that it broadcasts. But you can see it inserts into the likes table, and then we're selecting a user again. I'm not entirely sure why. Maybe that's just I think it might be reloading. Let's see. Okay, it didn't select a user that time. That might have been a happenstance. So anyway, we just issued the minimal query that we need to issue, right? To delete from the likes or to add to the likes. And so it keeps track. We can do things like show me my liked tweets because we have a likes table now. We can do all that sort of stuff. And I mean, in fact, like, that looks similar to, I'll tell you, we won't show it, but you basically can say like ash.query.filter, and in a filter you can say, likes.tweet.author ID equals, someone else. And it's like, show me the tweets that I've liked that are authors from somebody else, right? Or that have been liked. Sorry, there's a weird way to say that. If I wanted to say, show me the, all right. Either way, the point is you can reference related data in the query.
Yeah.
And this is why if I want to show a live code something, I should prepare it a little bit better. But the point is, you can reference related data in the filter, and Ash will synthesize the joins under the hood. You don't have to explicitly write join to that table and then filter.
Right. Dude, wow. That's a lot of power. I mean, we're looking at very few lines of code, but wow, like that's a lot of power packed into this page. And with pub sub too?
Like count, that's at the bottom here. Yeah, pub sub comes from it. Like count is one line of code, right? This makes a count of fields. So now you can say, some tweet, and you can say load like count, or you can load it in the query when you do it, and you can filter on this. I can say like ash.query.filter like count is greater than 10, right? Or I can sort by it. And Ash will put it in the SQL query and make it available. Like it'll figure out how to do that to sort and filter. And you can even you can reference it from a calculation. I can say calculate, is popular, and I can say this is like this. I can say right that makes is popular available as a calculation on the resource. And if you put this in an API. In a GraphQL, the user could say, is it popular? And it'll come back and say, right? So like this logic is available.
It's everywhere. Wow. Yeah, this is amazing. All right. Well, you showed me something before this that I thought was exceptionally impressive. Like say, there's a whole friending feature and following people on Twitter. You showed me it in the command line. You're like, let me just spin up an admin interface. And like, I feel like seconds went by and you had a whole admin interface. Can we just do that live?
Yeah, sure. Let's do it. So what I did basically, I am a busy person and I didn't quite get all of what I had expected to get for this initial example done, which was to have a little page where you could manage your friends. But in a nice twist of fate, this is actually a good teaching example, or a good example to show how this kind of works, which is the resource logic is there, but I don't have a UI for it. So let's say, I don't want to work on the UI right now. I just want to make sure that it works the way that I expect it to, right? So if you look in this, we have this visible to calculation. We're filtering the tweets to see this. And we have this thing where either I'm the author of the tweet, or it's a public tweet, or it's visible because I'm a friend of that user. And that is like, where there exists an approved friend request for the author of the tweet, where where the user you provided is the target of that approved friend request, right? So I could go into IEX and I could say, look up the user and call the actions available to add a friend, but I don't want to. Instead, what I will do is I will add the admin UI. So what this looks like is I bring in the dependency. And we'll let this compile. And then what I would do is I would go into my router, and I've just commented out here, but this is in the guide. You just copy it in, where we say put the admin UI, at /admin. And then I could go to my different APIs, like the tweets API, and I would add, I actually already have #admin.api. So I would say admin do, and I would say show true. And you can see I've added that new extension, and it's already showing up in the autocomplete for the resource. And I want the formatter to not add parens, so I will add #admin there. And then I can do the same thing in accounts.
I just can't believe how many different plugins Ash has. Like I feel like you've written like a dozen different libraries in one. And they're all you just bolt them on top of each other. Oh, we have an admin user face. There's GraphQL. Oh, there's a policy library. Like, golly.
So this is the benefit of, I would say, we talked about sort of the secret, we talked about really the what makes Ash so powerful. Number one is that all of the actions are called in the same way. And any tool can look and say, what are the actions on this resource? What are the types of inputs that the action accepts? This is why people like GraphQL as well, right? You can do GraphQL code gen for the same reason. But this brings all those nice things about GraphQL into your app instead of like an API layer, so that you can use those tools for any API that you want to build, or for whatever it is you're trying to build. And so that interface, the consistent interface, is the trick. And it's what powers this exact thing that we're about to see, which is now I have an admin UI at /admin, right? And the admin UI knows the APIs I configured, right? I said, show this API in the admin UI. It knows all the resources available to it. I can go in and I can say, show me the users that exist in here. And I could go update them if I wanted to. And you can see I can go and look at the tweets. And I can take a look at the tweets. Look at this. Let's say there's a specific user. Let me find one. I'm like, I'm trying to debug something, or I don't know, whatever it is. You want to see what this guy's or gal's feed looks like. I can go in and I can go to tweet. I can go to the feed action, and it's like, well, there's an argument for this action. It's user ID. Put in the user ID, and look, that's the feed for that user ID. But if I were to put in like a different user ID, like, are all of these by the same person? They are. Either way, if I put in a different user ID, it would show me the feed for that user. So I can sort of simulate that. And I could make a tweet as a specific user. Here's an interesting thing. You'll notice the way that tweet creation worked is that it actually uses the actor. That's like the current user. Ash has a concept, it's what runs the policies and all sorts of other stuff. It has a concept of the current user. So you need to be an actor in order to create. And actually, I think it'll give you an error if I say hello. Yeah, it says could not relate to actor. No actor was found, right? So what I can do is I can go into users, and I can add the #admin.resource extension. And I can say that this is an actor. You can log in as one of these, right? and I'll refresh the page. It'll recompile. And look, I have a set user button.
Wow.
When I set user, it takes me to the list for default list action for those things. And I can click on the key here and say, I'm this user now. I want to behave as this user. Now I go into tweets and let's see. I'll show you even another thing. Okay. I'll go to tweet. I'll create a public tweet as some user.
Wait, and so do you get pub sub from the admin UI? You don't have to wire up anything because of it's just sitting on top of Ash.
Yeah. Something happened.
Okay.
Yeah, it failed to set the actor for some reason, but let's try that again.
Don't you have to hit the play icon? I think you were showing me that.
Yeah, but it's already clicked.
Oh, okay.
It's already done. I think because it uses local storage for this, so it's probably just like a local storage thing. But look at that. Load one new tweet. Right? That was the pub sub received.
Yeah.
One new tweet. Right? So this is a really powerful pattern, and it allows me to do things like what we've already talked about. If I go into users, and I, well, I mean, you can even see I can register a user with the register with password option, right? That kind of thing.
Wow.
But let's say I want to do, I want to test my new friend feature where this person should be able to see the private tweets of somebody he's friends with. Then I'll go into accounts and I'll go into user. Let's go find the user and let's make these users friends. I'll update. It says add and request friend. That's the name of the action. So let's say I want to request a friend for this guy. I'll save. And you can see my friends shows that user now. And then I'll go back and I'll do it the other direction for this person. Oh, there's the wrong button. Either way. All right, there we go. So now you can see you got, here's my friends. Here's the people that are listed as friends to me.
Yep.
You even have like approved friend requests and pending friend requests. There's no pending friend requests, right? So this is all the structure we'll need to build the UI that we want to build. And now if I were to refresh this page, I can see all the private tweets of the other person, right?
Yep.
Technically, because I haven't added permissions around it, I could edit those tweets, but it's a demo app, right? We
right.
factor in every possible thing. But yeah, so you can see the admin UI lets you work really quickly. It lets you kind of like, a lot of times you're building an application, you care about like a specific complicated part of your UI. You don't care about like every list view everywhere. You don't care about every, So in a lot of cases, and this is, we'll use it with clients like this is, hey, we've got this admin UI so we can create data and play with it. And then we've got the real UI that we're working on over here. And we don't have to do everything all at once to make the real UI work. We can just work on the things that we think will be challenging to start with and use the admin UI for the rest of it. You could even, use this to register users and not worry about, giving people a register button when you're in the beta phase. Like, there's a lot of uses for it. So yeah, it's really powerful.
Yeah, like the only proper reaction that I can have is like, this is actually mind blowing. Like that, and the reason why I say that is because you've also demonstrated that you've created these like just hooks where you can, if you want to do something custom, you can get in there and do it. And then once you do it, you just demonstrated that like the pub sub, if you create in the admin interface, it's going to do the pub sub to the LiveView. And if you do it via, JSON API, all these other things, this is
crazy.
Go ahead.
All right. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, you go.
This is how I write the blog. On Ash. That's why I have a blog data layer that I wrote that writes to a markdown file, and I hit the edit button, and there's a flag in the admin UI, which is so you can mark attributes as markdown attributes. And if you do that, it will give you a markdown editor that for the content, right? And then you can like side by side, preview your posts or whatever your markdown content is. And that's how the blog works in Ash HQ. Like that's implemented all with Ash, with a custom Ash blog data layer. And that's actually how I do it. That's how I write my blog posts for the Ash blog.
Amazing. So the way I'm looking at this and the way I'm feeling right now is the same way I felt when I looked at LiveView many years ago. I was like, there's no way that this will actually hold up under a production problem with like all the customization. And I'm on the other side of that at this point, and it's like, yeah, LiveView is the real deal. And I keep saying that to everyone. And so when I see this, I'm like, I'm drinking, and I'm just asking myself, when is the hangover coming? When is the hangover coming, Zach Daniel?
Yeah. There are. I mean, look, it's not all peaches and cream, right? Like, and I think like it would be the most naive thing I could say. And if anybody ever said to me, "This thing will solve all of your programming problems," I would stop listening, right? Like,
Right.
obviously, that's not true. Um, and so I think like what I think is really interesting is there are applications where using Ash will not help you or won't really be worth it, right? And in a lot of cases, like, so people will start with Ash and their app is like it's relatively simple. They're just writing to some database tables. They're not really modeling anything complicated. They're not building like a production level system, or even they are, and it's just like the flows are so simple. Like, so what happens with those people is they'll end up using Ash like Ecto, where they just use basic CRUD actions, right? They don't model the real actions of their system. They just use it like create, update, read, destroy. And Ash will never be a better Ecto than Ecto is, right? We encourage people to use them side by side when they need to, because Ash is not designed to map to SQL and give you SQL operations. Well, my watch is talking at me.
Okay.
So yeah, Ash, it's just not designed for that. So a lot of times what happens is people will try Ash with like a little toy app or something. And what they'll say is well, this is slower. Like I could do this faster with Ecto. And it's like, the more complicated that your app is, which is, kind of to call back to the original, thing we mentioned in this app is, a lot of people having the idea that Ash is made for simple things, right? It's actually the other way around, which is that the simpler your app is, the less
value
useful
you get
Ash
out of
will
it.
be to you.
Wow, that's absurd. Okay.
So
Okay.
yeah.
Wow. Okay. So, I mean, that's what's interesting is because this originally started from, hey, how does LiveView and Ash interface? Like, how do they work together? And as we're going through this demo, like the LiveView layer is almost trivial. Like, you do have it seems like we discussed this. There's like two modules that are interesting, which is the Ash Phoenix.form module for creating change set forms that are kind of like wrapped in Ash. And then there's an Ash Phoenix.LiveView module. Like those are really like the only things that kind of matter, because at the end of the day, Ash is built, it's like this inner layer, and then you just talk to it from LiveView, right?
Exactly. Yep. That's a great way to think about it. And the LiveView ends up being, I think LiveView is amazing because it makes this process so much simpler. You just call directly into Ash. You don't have to go through an API extension or whatever. But yeah, so we have Ash Phoenix.form. We also technically have Ash Phoenix.filterform, which I actually didn't even talk to you about, but filterform lets you build complex Boolean forms that will, when you submit them, they will return a Ash query that will filter data. So like you could have a table view that's like a query over your resources, and then above that you can have a filter form that when you submit it will filter the table view, right? So if you want to build like a sort of complex query. And then Phoenix. There's some utilities around running queries and periodically refreshing them and managing the data in them, and that's Ash Phoenix.LiveView keep live, and that also comes with ability, like it has helpers for paginated views of a list query, so that what you can do is you can say like Ash Phoenix.
Oh, so you can keep live on a particular page within a query. That's really nice.
Exactly.
Wow.
So you can get the page from the page params, and then you can like paginate.
I can see it. Okay.
Over an Ash page, and you can go to the next page of an Ash page and figure out what page you're on. And so that's actually what we use here. This is a paginated view. Hold on. If I were to go into users and I were to go to the read action, and I were to say pagination, let's say maybe offset based, right? So if I were to do this, you'll see, that's not the, that's admin. That now when I go to the users list view, that it's paginated now, right? So we use those same utilities to do pagination for the admin UI.
Amazing. Yeah. So I look at this and like I'm just adding it on to all the other things you've shown, which is there's a authentication library, there's an authorization library, there's a pagination library, there's a GraphQL library, there's a LiveView library. Like there's easily, and I'm sure that there's more. I've seen you effectively write 12 different libraries, and there's probably another dozen on top of that. So, and then I also see you in the Discord answering people's questions like crazy. So like, I mean, where's this coming from? Like, I think, didn't you, okay, so you have a sponsor, right?
Yes, yeah. A sponsor may even be like not a serious enough word. That's the word I use. I often say they're my sponsor, but I mean they're my employer, and
Okay.
so they what I think is quite nice. So it's Alembic. They're an agency. They build ambitious projects using Elixir, LiveView. I mean all kinds of things. React. Um, the list kind of goes on. There's a lot of people there with a wide array of skills, um, and they saw Ash, in earlier days, and they saw the potential in not only in speeding up development, not only in making more powerful applications, but as an agency, like when you need to build lots of different applications, having a standard core that aids with reusability, that allows you to move pieces from one app to another, and create packages and libraries and extensions that will behave predictably, that is an agreed set of tools, is really powerful for that. So if you're somebody who's building lots of applications, not necessarily in the context of an agency, Ash is really powerful. You can share so many of the components in Ash are designed to be shareable. Anywhere in the app, the demo app I showed you today, where it supports an anonymous function, also supports providing a module, and that module should implement a specific callback, right? So if you have a manual action implementation, a change implementation, a custom check or a custom policy or whatever, you can put those in a library and you can share them amongst all of your applications. And so in that way, Ash really aids reuse across different applications. So, they were big on LiveView really early on for a lot of these same reasons, right? The huge increase in velocity, especially early velocity. And Ash kind of fits the bill as the long-term sustainability piece of the application logic that exists, that to allow that to live for longer, and to allow that to have a conventional setup, so that when you build in LiveView, you don't find out later, I can't build my API, or I didn't really set myself up for success on that front. So yeah, and I would say, Alembic is accepting project proposals, or have those discussions with them. Obviously, you can tell from the way I talk about it, that's not my wheelhouse. I do the technology, but we've got people that are some of the best people I've ever worked with, and so reach out if you've got something interesting. It doesn't have to be like you already have a pre-existing Ash application, and it doesn't have to be that you want to build with Ash. We think it's a good idea, but we can do anything.
Awesome. Okay. Well, shout out to Alembic. I mean, the only thing that I see that's really a downer here is like it's clear that there's going to be a learning curve for doing things in Ash, because it enables so much. Like that core layer needs to be written in Ash, and I think. But on the other side of that learning curve, I mean what I'm seeing here is exceptionally compelling. And I'm going to build my new company website with Ash on top. I mean, what you're showing with the blog post, I was kind of like lamenting creating our blog, but shoot, like, why not try out some Ash? So, I mean, of course, asking you about the learning curve is probably kind of ridiculous, because, you've been looking at this for years now. But I mean, I don't know if you have any suggestions for somebody who's jumping into this. Like, I think the learning curve here is big, but I do think that the API is pretty obvious also. So, what would be your advice to somebody who's jumping into Ash?
Yeah. I mean, the learning curve is steep. It is just it's a whole new vocabulary. But the best advice I can give really is, like, you just start making something, because realistically, it doesn't take very long to make projects, to make things with Ash, to make an API, to make a website with, especially Ash LiveView. Like, I mean, it's just not that big of an investment. Obviously, I can say that as somebody who's like an expert in both of those tools. So I'm not saying it's going to be 10 minutes and you're going to have an app, right? but just get your wheels on the ground, because the best teacher, in my opinion, is reality, right? Like when you actually try to do something and you're like, well, I can't do this, right? And then in that world, now that you've tried something and you're like, I can't figure out what pieces to compose. Maybe you've looked over the docs, or you've tried to find it, right? But come to the Discord, because there's a lot of people who are in your shoes. We have a lot of new users, and there's a big focus on us, on the community helping each other. Like that to me is one of the best parts about Ash, is that there's never like a question that's too stupid or any, it's nothing like that, right? It's a very helpful community, and that's exactly the kind of community I always hoped I could build around it. Is a very welcoming and helpful and inclusive community. So just ask those questions, like try it out, see what you can do, play with it, and then fire away.
Well, outstanding. Yeah, I mean, I see that there's a reason why, there's a lot of buzz around Ash. And I mean, straight up, I'm going to do our new company website in this and, kick the tires on this thing. Because, yeah, it looks like it does. And I mean, there's plenty of applications running in production, right? Like, this is not just Ash has been around for years. Like, this isn't just like theory.
Yeah, I mean, we have people who have been in production for like at least a year and a half, maybe even 2 years. And I mean, granted, those people a year and a half ago were really bleeding it, like they were cowboys, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But at this point, it's very, very stable, and we're able to focus on like we're out of the sort of weeds of just make the basic stuff work, and we're very much onto like really high level, super useful stuff like Ash authentication. Like that's the kind of stuff that's going to keep coming, right? Like because we built a good foundation to add those things on.
Wow, amazing. Well, I hope that the people watching this find this as compelling as I have, because, yeah, I'm going to kick the tires on this thing. So thank you so much, Zach.
It's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. Thank you for having me. This has been really good.